YouTube, how are we doing? We're back for another video, and just a quick update on this one. We are officially now 13 weeks out. We changed the show date, so you'll notice that there's going to be a slight switch in terms of the proximity of how far away we are from competition, but we're in good shape. We got a DEXA done the other day, came in around 10.7% body fat, lean mass is looking pretty good. We'll probably post those results on one of the off days, but we're in a good shape. So we are getting there. We're going to be moving and grooving. So I thought I'd do this quick little update before we get into the gym today, where we hit a nice little back day for you. So we'll see you in there. All right, so we're back again with a voiceover for back day, and kicking things off in today's session, we are using the viral exercise that is the Keenan flap. Now, if you haven't seen it already, I would recommend you go over to my TikTok at the Science-Based Lifter and check out my post that I did on the different flaps and what they work, as that got quite a bit of traction. But if you didn't, I'll give you a quick little brief thing here. So we're hitting the more frontal plane adduction flap, and I actually have started using this as my session warm-up. And the reason being is because we're using a cuff and reducing the moment arm, we're actually making the exercise a little bit easier, and we're working in a range of motion that is generally pretty safe. So we can load this up from the get-go without really worrying too much about the risk of injury and things like that. And honestly, I think there is quite a good utility to these specific exercises. I don't think that we should be spinning down the scapula or anything like that. I think we should allow a little bit of scapular elevation, just in case your lats do insert on your scap, because for some people it does. I don't know whether mine do or don't, but what I will say is I definitely feel it more when I allow that little bit of scapular elevation. So we hit one set here to failure. Not a particularly crazy load. I think I'm at 70% of my predicted 1 repetition max here. And so we use this to kick off the back day session. And then I decided to just have a play around today because I haven't done a more kind of sagittal pullover for a little while. So I decided to just do this variation of a seated pullover. So take some of the stability demand out of the legs in terms of like the typical bent over pullover that you might see other people do. And quite honestly, I do enjoy this exercise. And again, we are still allowing the shoulders to go into a little bit more flexion beyond what is seen as the optimal leverage angle, and the lats losing leverage at above 120 degrees. So we're still not getting to 180 degrees, but we're going a little bit past 120. And I quite honestly still feel my lats quite a lot in this exercise. So I think it's a perfect combination exercise to throw in the warm-up. And then we move on today into our primary lift. I have been spamming the traditional lat pull downs. I still think that these are going to be the GOAT in terms of lat development. And I think that we'll have to run a study, and I might even do a slight little individual case study in terms of the flaps versus the lat pull down, and switch some volumes around to see which one affects my muscle growth more. But if there's more people out there, also you could do this, so maybe we can all get together and do a little bit of a applied type study to see if the pull down is any better or any worse than the flaps. So we're taking a little bit more of a narrower grip with this, so still using the pull down bar and generally not trying to lean back too much. I've been a little bit more focused recently on terms of keeping my torso position the same throughout the set and not swinging and kind of making it a bit more of a low row type exercise rather than a straight true pull down. And so because we already kind of warmed up the lats with our previous 2 exercises, we just hit 2 working sets within this specific lift. So it's definitely one where I still think that this is a primary exercise that you should use. And I have been kind of playing around recently with a top set and then a back down set with a little bit more volume. We've still got quite a ways to go in terms of how many weeks we are out from competition. So I'm still hitting a little bit more volume type work and eating a little bit more calories. So that's where you'll notice that we did go down, I think it was 10 pounds in this set. So we do get a couple of extra reps, but we're still taking the same approach, keeping the form standardized, and then hitting a slight length and partial there at the end. And so we're sticking in the machine and sticking to the theme of using straps. Again, I don't think that the grip is as limiting in the vertical pull downs as it is in the horizontal pulls, so this low row variation. So I always definitely use straps in terms of horizontal rowing. And if you've been following my journey so far, you'll already know that anyway. But again, we're now somewhat in some circles thinking about biasing the lower lats here. I don't think that we can truly bias an area, but we are going to get a slight little bit more activation based on some EMG data and based on the internal moment arm data that we can see in the literature. So if this is biasing the lower lats, that's cool. But again, we're really throwing it in there because we're actually getting a slight different length tension relationship. We're getting slight different musculature in terms of synergists, and it's a slight different position. So we want to get a total back day covered. And so that's why we have the low row variation in here. And one of the other keys is there is 2 different handle attachments. I like to keep the elbows in a little bit more narrower because I think that is going to give us a lot more lat than wide grip. Though there is some mixed results out there on that as well in terms of EMG activation data and things like that, which is a reason why we can't always trust EMG data too. But generally speaking, keeping those elbows in towards the body is going to be a winner there for a more total back exposure within this lift. And then once we've kind of done this one, we actually did a little bit of a variation, which I haven't really done too much of in the past. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't hit my head, so I did one rep where I kind of looked where the arc went and then stood up into the more traditional low to high row using this machine. Now, I actually thought the resistors profile felt pretty good on this, and being able to do it single-sided. And we are getting a little bit of shoulder rotation, trunk rotation as we come down into the lowering aspect of it. But overall, I actually felt my lats way more on that exercise than I have on a lot of other exercises that I've performed in the past. So this one is sticking in my rotation. I think I'm going to keep it in there. And again, it's just varying up the slight different length tension relationship, slight different positions. We've gone from our more vertical pull downs now to our more low horizontal pulls. And so I think that if we have a combination of these in with whatever specific exercises that you decide to do, as long as these positions stay within the themes of your lifts, you're going to grow your back. And it's definitely been affecting mine recently. And so again, sticking with the theme of hitting 2 sets, I actually did forget to record the left side on this one. So you just get the right hand side twice in terms of 2 sets. So I didn't skip my more weaker side. But the one thing I will say at this point is make sure that you train the weaker side first in any of your unilateral exercises, because this is when you'll be a little bit more fresh. And you'll notice that actually I generally rep match within my sets, but sometimes I might actually be a little rep short on the opposite side, and that's because I'm not giving myself enough rest. So another word from the wise here is make sure you also take ample rest between sides so you can give a little bit of time to recover. Now, I'm not cuff crazy, but I decided to do this one with cuffs as I've been definitely feeling that grip has been a limiting factor in my shrugs. And I definitely was able to lift slightly heavier this way. Now, the only thing is the comfort and the cushion on these Riffs cuffs are not the greatest. So it did, after a little while, start to hurt, not gonna lie. But we pushed through it and we got our sets done. But quite honestly, probably could use the D handles and still get a similar effect. And again, we're just hitting 2 sets pretty much for everything these days. And it's not because I've been fully convinced that 2 sets is optimal or anything like that. But I think 2 sets is a good enough number of exposures for the different musculature. And I think with things like the traps where we don't actually get as much love, I think as time goes on, I will add another set or a slight different exercise. But because we're in our accessory work here, I'm not losing my sleep over it too much. And it's not necessarily a weak point of mine if you have seen any of my traps in my posing videos. So we've got to get a little bit of rear delt love in this video. And recently I did also do a post on the rear delts because what we generally are seeing is a little bit of confusion in terms of what is the best exercise for the rear delt. And so people are now suggesting that the sagittal pull down would be a little bit better in terms of rear delt development than this more rear delt fly. And so I think that because of the kind of shoulder extension moment that the rear delts have, that this has been confused with optimizing the rear delt fibers. And instead, I think that this exercise is going to be the one that you should keep in your rotation. And even if you did do the sagittal flap, it would get you a little bit of rear delt development, but I think the lat is doing a lot more of the heavy work here. Whereas in this exercise, it's rear delt. Yeah, there is some traps for sure, but we are generally being okay with it being that. And so moving on, we went into our core work, and I had to get a little creative with the pull down setup. I think some fitness influencers are trying to claim this as their specific named exercise. So if anybody wants to call this the CT crunch, feel free to, or maybe the science-based lifter crunch, the SBL crunch. But we got a little creative in terms of using this because I don't feel it in my abdominals as much when I'm in the kneeling position, and I tend to cheat a little bit and go into too much hip flexion. So if you are trying to target the abs and you are trying to get some crunch type variations in, this pro setup is the one for you, as it's fairly easy to get set up. You just use the rope, you just pull yourself down into your lords, your thighs. And honestly, my biggest kind of like drawback with this specific exercise is holding the rope. Like I feel like the rope's end typically crushes my pinky fingers. And if you were observant there, you'll notice that it also knocks out my earphones, my AirPods. So I need a bit of a different solution when it comes to my headphones for this exercise so that my AirPods don't go flying on the floor every time that I do the lift. And so as this is a more of an accessory exercise for the end of the session, we do hit 3 sets here because the abs haven't got much love at all during this back day because a lot of our work was either lower limb supported or chest supported. So in terms of getting the abs some true exposure, we hit 3 sets. Now you could add more exercises in if you wanted to, but we do get abs distributed across the training week in my current training block. Now, we've seen this before in my videos, hopefully, and that is doing calves on back day. So we've started to split calves up now and not actually do them on leg day as much and actually get them in on back day. And this is a little bit of a creative setup in this more like split stance position where we've got the heel elevated or the foot elevated on the plates. And the reason why my front foot is actually at the front of the plates is because when I was going into the descending motion, the plates were tilting up because I don't have a little small plyo box or anything. So in terms of being able to keep the plates down, but also get a good exposure to the calves, this is why we did this. And we mainly focus in the bottom position. You know that I'm a big advocate of the lengthened position with training the calves. And so that's why our main focus is there and getting some volume load into it. And I will say that although I don't have the biggest calves in the world, I have definitely seen some growth improvement since switching my calf volume up and the exercises that I'm doing and the focus of the exercises being more in that bottom range. And we are still technically going above halfway as well. So don't forget to not do the top range as well, because there are some fibers that respond more positively to that concentric squeeze as well. And it's all about generating a mechanical signal at the end of the day. So this is a good setup in terms of having some stability. It's a little bit harder to do if you were trying to do this variation with a barbell. So having the Smith machine is definitely a winner for calves here. And because we are, again, trying to get more exposure, I am trying to go single leg with this so we can work out any imbalances. And also we're taking these all to failure as well. And although it might not be videoed, because I think I forgot to video the last set of these, we are hitting 3 sets overall. So again, a key takeaway is at the end of this lift, within the true last little bits of essentials that we want to get in the session, we are hitting 3 sets, whereas everything else in the lift is 2 sets. And that pretty much wraps us up for this session. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give this video a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. And don't forget to comment if you have any questions around this training program. And make sure you tune in for the next one.